What's up, Marvel fans? We're the Hills Maniacs, and today we're going to be talking about the ending of Episode 4 of Moon Knight and what it might actually mean.
Watching episode 4 of Moon Knight, it brings up a lot of questions, especially the ending. But we'll get into that.
Episode.
We'll get a little bit more into that later on.
Right.
So throughout the episode, we see them using the map that they got at the end of season 3 when Khonshu reversed the sky and crap, to find the tomb of Ammit, and there's these creatures and stuff. And
some stuff happens along the way.
They go more in depth with what happened to Layla's father, and then Stephen Grant finds Khonshu or Ammit's, what are they called, Shaktis or whatever.
Yeah. The little statue
inside the mouth of Alexander the Great, who is obviously dead, and he's a mummy. And then Harrow shoots Mark Spector, and he ends up in an asylum. And I guess the big question is this all in his head, or is he going back to a certain time in his life where this stuff might have been real? And I guess that's kind of where my mind went, was like, what if this isn't just like his mind playing tricks on him, making him think that he's insane? What if this actually did happen at some point to Mark Spector? Because, they mentioned he lost Steven, and Harrow seems to know a little bit more about Mark and Steven than either one of them really did. So was this like a previous, maybe Steven blipped, or something happened to where Steven was gone from his mind for whatever reason.
Right, because I think it definitely connects to his past in some way, like you said, and it has to do with all that stuff with, like, Harrow and Layla's father and all this other stuff.
Right.
And I think I like the way that they filmed this, or kind of showed this, first of all, where it starts off with him kind of waking up in the asylum. Well, toward the end of the episode. The episode doesn't start with that. But, like, it makes it seem like he's really in an asylum, and, like, Harrow is his therapist, and they're kind of discussing his, like, mental breaks and all that stuff. And then, as he's running down the hallway and stuff, he finds Steven. So you can kind of tell it's in his head. And there's a talking hippo at the end for some reason. So I don't know what that's about. But I think this has to do with, like, maybe this happened to him, like, because he mentions earlier to Layla that, or because she ends up talking to Harrow at some point in it, and Harrow reveals that Mark might have shot her father, and that's been her whole thing, is like trying to figure out what exactly happened to her father all those years ago. And Mark tells her that he was part of the team that went there, and one of his partners ended up shooting her father and everyone else there, including him, which I guess would mean,
because he got greedy.
Yeah, right. Which would be how, when Khonshu ended up going into Mark and Steven and all that other stuff. And I was thinking maybe based off of this and kind of him, because he's now seeing this after Harrow shot him in this episode, maybe Harrow was that partner that was with Mark back then, the one that shot him. Because we know that Harrow was once the avatar for Khonshu, and Khonshu might have jumped out of Harrow into Mark at that point, after Harrow shot him. So now Harrow left, and Khonshu abandoned him, and he ends up as the avatar for Ammit. So I think maybe after that point, Mark ended up in an asylum, and he didn't have Steven in his head anymore and all this other stuff. It's either connected to, like, Khonshu coming into his head and he lost Steven, or maybe, like you said, and I've heard it theorized and stuff on several different, like, videos and things like that, that maybe somehow Steven's soul was blipped during Thanos' snap, because it is a separate entity, kind of. So maybe that's why Mark ended up in an asylum, because he's kind of broken, because he doesn't have that identity anymore, and he misses it and everything else, and now his mind is associating that with the past events. And after he lost Steven, like, maybe that's during the 5 years during the blip or whatever, maybe is when Mark was still, he had to follow what Khonshu told him to do. Maybe it was just him and Khonshu, because then he even mentioned in the last episode to Layla that he was able to control his, or he wasn't switching back and forth between his other personalities for a while. He was able to control it, and then something happened. But yeah, I think that would be an interesting way to sort of tie this into like the blip, because we haven't really mentioned that, and like, or that, I mean, they haven't mentioned that in the show yet, like that the blip happened and all that other stuff, and what that the ramifications for these characters were. So maybe that was when all the souls came back, you know, like from the Avengers and stuff. Then Steven and the other identities that maybe were snapped away ended up coming back into Mark's mind, and now he wasn't able to control it again. So I would like to see, like, if that is the case, because we've seen this in other things where, like, somebody's dying and they start to see things, or they get shot or whatever.
Or they flash back to an event that happened.
Yeah, that was similar to it or something like that. Like, we've seen it in a bunch of TV shows and movies and things like that.
Right.
So it's not uncommon to think that maybe this asylum thing happened in the past. Maybe the reason he was in the asylum in the first place was because he kept, like, he was kind of delusional or something, or people thought he was delusional,
already had
talking about
personality,
talking about Khonshu and Steven and all this other stuff, and they just put him in an insane asylum, and then he would have escaped eventually. So maybe this was kind of a flashback to that, but also connecting it to his current situation, because he saw Harrow in this dream. Layla was there, a bunch of, I think it was some other people he's interacted with over the series so far. We're kind of all working in the asylum and things like that. So it was kind of interesting to see that dynamic, and I'd like to see, because right now he still doesn't have Khonshu yet, and he didn't get Khonshu back yet. We have 2 episodes left. So I kind of think that's a nice tie-in to his past, and maybe we'll see more of this, him being in the asylum and stuff. Maybe that'll be the whole next episode, is him recovering from being shot. Because the last we saw of him, he was shot in that tomb and fell into like a pool of water or something.
Yeah,
so
I think it was just a puddle. I don't even think there was anything. I think it was just like a area that had water on it.
It's just a little bit of water.
Like, I don't think he actually fell into it.
So we don't really know exactly what happens with like Layla and Harrow and all them.
Right.
Like,
or did they get the
you know,
Shati or whatever it was called of Amit from Mark Spector.
But yeah, I like that it shows it gives us an inside look into sort of like Mark's head. Like maybe this is what he always sees too, like when he's switching back and forth between the identities or something. Maybe it's like this asylum or like a mind palace kind of thing, like we've seen from like Sherlock Holmes and stuff, where he stores information. I don't know how that works for somebody with multiple identities and things like that, but maybe that is a personification of his different personalities and stuff.
Well, and I like too that when it showed the asylum stuff, it showed he ended up in this room where he opened the sarcophagus and it was Steven Grant inside. So then when he let him out of the sarcophagus, he was like, how is this possible? Because now they're fully looking at each other as if they are 2 separate people and not just in the head of each other. They were looking at them as if they were 2 separate people. And then as they kept walking down the hallway, there was another one with somebody like screaming inside and the thing was shaking. I think that's that third personality.
That could be too.
And Mark might have known that, and that's why he didn't go near it to open it, because they don't want this third personality to come out and be its own thing, because then they can't control it. So I kind of like how they had all 3 personalities as separate people now, and that might come into play later. Like, Steven might not be with Mark Spector anymore. He might end up somehow becoming his own person, or he might actually be gone from now on, or vice versa. Like maybe Steven is the main one and Mark is gone now, because they're all separate people, so it kind of plays into that. And I kind of liked how they did that, and it was kind of real subtle too. Like you didn't think anything of it at first. It was just another sarcophagus in another room, but we know that there's most likely at least 3 personalities within the head of Steven Grant or Mark Spector, whichever one's the main one. So that could have been that, and he didn't want to let him out.
Right, and maybe it'll turn out that he has to in order, like, I don't know how he's going to survive being shot twice, especially without, like, Khonshu being there, unless it has something to do with the talking hippo lady, who might be some kind of other goddess or something that's in his head somehow. That whole thing didn't make any sense.
She's the goddess of asylums.
Sure.
She shows up at all insane asylums
Right.
and helps people. Yes.
But let us know what you guys thought of this weird ending to Moon Knight Episode 4 down in the comments section. Also, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more. We plan on covering the rest of this series as well, and any other Marvel-related content when it comes out.
Thanks for watching the video, everyone, and remember, leave the scumbaggery at home, and we'll see you guys in the next one.
Subscribe.